Hi, and welcome to episode 173 of the Heartland Knits podcast. My name is Vicki, but you can find me as Heartland Knits on Ravelry and Instagram. And today is Sunday, September 17th, 2017. I have a lot of new things to show you, new projects on the needles, new finished projects. I don't know that you've even seen me talk about in the works process. And I have a whole bunch of new kind of stash acquisitions. Last weekend was Wisconsin sheep and wool. And that's really why I had to sit down and record today, was they're all laying on a table over there and I want to be able to put them away. It's not a ton of stuff, just more than I usually have to show you. So anyway, I thought I have to sit down and record today, at least a little bit, so that I can put those things away. I am thinking that this podcast will become sort of a once a month podcast. Things will actually get finished in a more timely manner. It will seem like things are finished instead of me talking about the same sweater for weeks on end. And then maybe in between there, probably in between there, I will do more of a sewing centric podcast episode where I talk about my sewing projects, because I do have a bunch of those planned, and I think there's been quite a few of those that you haven't seen either. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking. But I will start out this podcast with what's on my needles, and it relates a little bit to last weekend at Wisconsin Sheep and Wool. I had been working on a shawl, a little Boo Knits shawl out of some Kid Silk Haze. It's kind of this very kind of light, it looks just sort of beige on the camera, but when you take it outside, there is a slight pink cast to it. Let's see if I do have I don't know if this color is available anymore, but it was color 653. If you've watched the podcast for a while, you may remember this yarn as something I was knitting a shawl from. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I was knitting a Boo Knits shawl because I had these beads. I bought them together, and it's this mixture. You can't really see all the colors, but they blend really beautifully with this yarn. So anyway, a couple years ago, I started knitting a Boo Knits shawl that had kind of beads up in the stockinette portion. A lot of her shawls are either stockinette or garter, kind of up at the top, and then she has a big fancy border on the edge. And this one that I was doing, I think it was Out of Darkness, it had beads scattered up throughout that more solid area, and then beads in the lace. And I ran out of beads and I decided to rip it out. So I ripped the shawl out, and then kind of at the end of August, I decided, I took this yarn out again and thought, okay, I'm going to try this again. And I started knitting the Fragile Heart shawl, which I've knit before. And I thought, I'm just going to do the beads kind of on the bottom lace section. I should have enough. I have this whole tube. I mean, it's not the largest tube of beads, but I thought if I don't do them till the edge, that should be okay. So I knit the entire Fragile Heart. I have 2 skeins of this yarn, so that's 450 so yards. And I knit the whole thing, and I got to the second from last right side row, bead row, and I ran out of beads. Some of the little beads in that tube are just silver lined, kind of crystal beads, the kind I've put on a lot of different shawls. I thought, well, I will just do that last row kind of with those silver lined beads. It'll be fine. It has a beaded cast off, and I did one repeat of the beaded cast off and just looked at it, and the the silver line crystal beads were just slightly different size than the beads on the whole rest of the edge, and it just was not going to do it. I thought, I'm not going to be happy wearing this. I will have to give it away or throw it away or whatever. Just stop right now. And so this was last, like maybe Thursday or Friday night. So I ended up ripping that whole shawl out again. And I have just started a new shawl. And how this relates to Wisconsin Sheep and Wool is one of the vendors there had some beautiful lace shawls in her booth. She was a very nice lady, very sweet, and she was from way over on like the eastern side of Michigan, so she had come a long way. But I asked her about her shawls, and her yarns were really beautiful, lace weight, and I kind of my color palette that I really like, kind of more pastels and things. I loved them. I would have bought something from her, except they were all gradients, and I'm kind of over the gradient. I still have some to spin. I still have some as yarn to knit with, and I will do that. So anyway, she told me about all these shawls. She test knit many of them for this designer, and I had never heard of her before, and they were beautiful shawls. Her name is Anna Victoria, the designer's name, and I think she's British. I think she lives in London, and her shawls are very similar to the Boonitz shawls in that they're kind of very lacy crescent-shaped shawls, kind of with a very fancy edge. Hers are a little fancier. Her kind of beginning middle sections are much lacier, but they're very, very heavily beaded. I'm not doing the heavily beaded, but I thought when the Fragile Heart didn't work out, this was sort of in the back of my mind. I started a shawl, and it's called the Saphira beaded lace shawl. I'll show you this picture. So this is this pattern by Anna Victoria, and I have just started, I think I started yesterday, and I just got this little middle section done. So it's a pretty kind of lacy middle, and I'm to the point where you can extend it out and make it larger by repeating this section more, and then you've got this fancy border. She does a couple things in her pattern. She's very giving percentages and that kind of thing for yarn usage, but she also states in each section, they are very heavily beaded. I think if you did all of the beads in it, it would be maybe 1,200 beads or something. I'm just going to be the very outer edge, and she states how many beads it takes. And as I was ripping out, as I took the beads off of the knitting, I place them in the little tube. I counted them, so I know that I will have enough for that outer edge. So that is kind of my first project. I was working on that this morning. And then I have a new sweater on the needles. So I have wanted to start a sweater since I came home from knitting camp. And I kind of put it off for that month because I knew I was going to be going to Wisconsin Sheep and Wool, and I was expecting to buy sweater yarn. There was one specific sweater I was going to buy yarn for, and then when I got there, it was a Green Mountain Spinnery yarn. Last year I was on the verge of buying it, and I bought different yarn instead, and this year when I went to their booth, all the colors just looked kind of flat. I don't know if it was just the day, it was a grayer kind of day outside. I mean, she even let me take it out, kind of outside in what daylight there was. And I don't know, they just didn't appeal to me this year, so I didn't buy any of that. And then I was thinking I was going to get some Sun Valley fibers because I love her yarn and her colors. And I couldn't decide on a color of that either. So I ended up not getting any new yarn for a sweater. So when I came home, I thought, okay, you've got lots of sweater yarn. Just decide on one. And the one I decided to do is this one, which has been in my queue for quite a while. It's called Hellebore. It is by Michelle Wang. And it looks like that. I'm going to make changes as per normal for me, but I love the very heavily cabled sleeves. I'm going to make mine into a cardigan, and I'm not sure of the length of it. I'm not sure what I'm going to put on the bottom edges of the cardigan or the middle edge. I haven't gotten there yet. But this I am doing out of Loft in this color, which is looking about like that. It's called Truffle Hunt. And I have a start of the fun part of on the sleeve. I made a start on it. I'm changing this up a little bit too, but you'll get to see the cable pattern. It will, it shows up much more in that lighter color. I had bought this yarn for, I think I bought this yarn for Brecken, and then I did Brecken in a different color, and I had enough for this one, and so I thought I'm going to go for it. I really like using Loft. I don't have issues with it at all. So this is my second attempt at knitting the sleeve of this also. I did swatches on it and came up on using size 3mm needles. And I just cast on for my size for the sleeve, and I got about this far and took a look at it and just thought this is going to be very, very loose. It doesn't show on this picture or any of the pictures in the pattern, but the underside of the sleeve is all done in reverse stockinette. So I ripped it out and have a narrower cuff, and then am increasing out so that the patterns line up nicely. So these are showing where I'm doing my increases for my sleeve increases. So you can see there's 3 kind of right together here. And that's so that the pattern kind of stays nicely, and then I will figure it out. It doesn't have to be increased absolutely evenly in steps because of how the cables cross, because of how the cables pull in when they cross. Doing 3 increases right in a row right here is not going to make it just balloon out right there. So but I think when people write up patterns, they don't necessarily want to, you can't really do this kind of for every size, or it would be very, very, very confusing. So, they measure it out. When they grade a pattern, they grade it out so it's even steps. But I like doing it so that the cables look pretty. So anyway, that is my sweater pattern and my first sweater on the needles. I have a second one that's still in a little bit of imagining. I'm ending up kind of starting from scratch on it. So, and the third project that I have to show you is something I have been talking about knitting for a while. It's something that I have wanted to knit for a while, and I'm not too far into it. I started this over the weekend too. But it is just the start. I can get my yarn. It's the start of a mitten. And here, I got it upside down. So this is the start, a little cuff of a mitten. And what this is, what you're seeing is the hem part, which is this little zigzag, is going to be tucked up. I'm right at the row where I'm going to be knitting these 2 needles together to knit the hem up. So it's this black and pink and green, and I'll show you the mitten. It comes from this book. I bought this book a year ago at camp, at Knitting Camp 2016. This is the Mittens of Latvia book by, her name is Maruta Grossman. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. And I am doing, this is a mitten that I picked out. When I was first looking through it, this is the one that popped out that I had to knit. And that is this rose one with the roses. I am doing a little bit different cuff pattern because this one didn't appeal to me. There is another rose one in there, and I was kind of going between the two. There's this one, and I was going between the two. So actually the bottom hem of it with the little zigzags is for this one, but I decided to do the roses. I decided to do the roses on this page instead. I just think they look a little more like roses. And then I chose a different cuff pattern. I'll show you the cuff that I'm doing. I'm adapting this pattern on this mitten with this little sort of scallopy leaf thing. I'm doing that on the bottom of the mitten. This yarn that I'm using is Fairy Hair by Kim Croft. It is Angora Merino mix, and it is so soft. I love using this for mittens. And so this is, I have to get to the point. It is black. Yeah, we had a couple really nice days, and that's when I started knitting this. So I'm not sure how it's going to be once the weather turns back again, back to cold. So I'm hoping to get these done fairly quickly so that I don't have the whole I can't see black yarn in the inside of the house thing. And because I've gotten to a point on this project where I have half object, I usually show you my stripy socks kind of every time, but since I finished one, so I don't have them on a blocker, but I did finish it. The heel is in and everything. And this is an old opal yarn. It was called Opal Circus. This is what it looks like. I have this wound into a cake. This goes pretty far back. I want to say maybe 2005 I bought this, or thereabouts, maybe 2004. I'm not completely sure. But kind of back then, I think I had started a pair, kind of 2 socks at a time, and I don't enjoy doing that. And so when I kind of pulled those out because I wasn't going to keep doing that, I just wound it into a skein, to a hank. And so now I've just got it into a cake. I got just the toe of my second one, and I did get them to match. So this is what I've been taking around. I think I showed it. Maybe I started these when I went to yarn. So I've been carrying these around in this little bag, which I love so much. It ties. I should tie it with a bow so it looks so there. And then I put my little "No, you're weird," my little blue vlog button on just in case I get any comments from someone. So off the needles, I have projects off the needles. I don't think that you saw me working on them. You might have seen them on my Instagram or little bits of them. But I started those Latvian mittens because I managed to finish a pair of Selbstbewahrer mittens. These come from that great big Selbstbewahrer book that I got at Christmas time last year. And I used some of the yarn that I bought at knitting camp this year, the Blackberry Ridge, to knit a pair of Selbstbewahrer. So I have these black and white mittens. And then this is the inside patterning. I loved doing these mittens so much. It was one of the most fun projects. So from beginning to end, I thoroughly enjoyed knitting these mittens. I could probably knit nothing but Selbstbewahrer mittens for a year and not begin to kind of duplicate the patterns that I used, but they bring me joy. It's a small thing, the tiny little needles, the sort of intricacy of the pattern. So I used size 0 needles with these, and this is the Blackberry Ridge fingering weight yarn. The only thing, and it's not showing up so much on there, the only thing, and I love this yarn. It was really enjoyable to use it. The only thing I will say about it is that it's really not showing up so much on there. Well, maybe a little bit. You can see how white this is on there's just a little 2x2 ribbing at the very edge. But then as you're knitting with the two colors, there's little hairs on the black yarn, little fibers kind of shed off just as you're knitting with it. And so the effect to me is not so much kind of stark white and black as it almost has a faint grayish cast. So it maybe they just look like they've been worn a little bit or something, but that's the only thing I will say that I'm, unhappy in the least about with these mittens. But it was so much fun to pull all the different patterns. So this is that big Norwegian book. It's all in Norwegian, but it has all these different patterns. And I pulled a couple for the cuff. I loved this little swirly one. And then I wanted something to do as like a firm break between the cuff and the back of the hand and palm side mitten patterns. And then I loved this one, kind of very, very swirly. And there are different sort of ways to kind of arrange the patterns on these mittens. Like some of them have kind of a star or roses or whatever, and there's one on top of the other, and there's different, I don't know kind of the translation of the Norwegian words. They show the different arrangements. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. But anyway, there was this one that had kind of this big pattern, and then I just sort of improvised these little stars and kind of repeated this element here from down here. And then the palm side, I loved these circles. I just think they're really, really fun. On they mirror the back of the thumb, mirrors those, but on the front of the thumb, these are mittens that you do make a gusset for, and I did this kind of a little gusset that had a heart, and then I did it over at the top here, and then just did a little star. So, I mean, you can just kind of play with the little patterns and make them work out. There's a whole, like 3 pages of patterns for this little side of the hand kind of patterns. I just did a one stitch because I wanted to use this really fancy pattern, and my gauge turned out a little bit larger than I was expecting it to, so I had to pare this down. I had like a 3-stitch one at the beginning, but I had to pare this down so that they wouldn't be too oversized, and they ended up to be kind of the perfect size for my hands. They're all stranded, and the strands are small enough. I should put one inside out so that you can see them inside out. But I am super, super happy with them. So there you can see that's the back of the hand side, and then the palm side looks like that. So throughout, I wanted the black pattern color to be the color that popped out the most. So I used that as my dominant color. So for me, my dominant color needs to be the bottom color. So when I came across and I was going to work that one little white stitch, where it has this little single white stitch, I would just kind of scoop it down underneath and put it on the needle that way, so that just that one stitch would pop out. Otherwise, I thought it would recede too much kind of in the background of all those other black stitches. I have done on other mittens, I have done where maybe on the back of the hand I would want the black to pop out, but on the palm side of the hand, depending on the pattern, I would want the white to pop out. So I have done them where I've switched it kind of halfway through, and you have to keep your wits about you and keep doing that all the way through, or it's going to show. But for this one, I just did that little technique for, pulling it down on underneath for that one little white stitch. But anyway, I am super, super happy with these. I knit a shawl. This was one of the projects that was sort of left from this summer. I had the yarn sitting out that I wanted to do, and when I came home from knitting camp, it was the first thing I cast on because it was something I was just going to follow the pattern and work. It is a hand spun yarn that I've had for quite a while. I actually spun this yarn to knit this shawl. I had a version of it in some sock yarn that was dyed this color, and the sock yarn just, it's merino sock yarn. It kind of does not hold the block. It just was never what I wanted. This one is what I wanted. So anyway, this is a pattern you've seen before, but it is the Herna Hergerber from the Icelandic 3-cornered and long shawl books. So I will hold this up. So you can see it's pretty large. I did extend it out to use almost the 600 yards that I had spun. And in this little middle area, I put in these silver lined crystal beads in the middle of the little diamonds. So this is a pattern that I love. It's really fun to knit, and I just think it packs a lot of bang for the buck. It's a very sort of slight crescent shape, not so shallow as some of the crescent shawls are. It does come to a point at the bottom. And this yarn was a singles yarn. I don't know how well it's going to show, but it is a color called Wild Things. It's my favorite color that Lisa Sousa dyes, and I spun this, and it's Wensleydale, which I love spinning. So it's a singles, but I love how the colors came out, and it's, very faint striping at the top, and then they get more blended kind of at the bottom. So I am looking forward to wearing this fall. I've had this since I think 2009 is when, or 2008, because she always puts a sort of dates her yarn or her tags or where her fiber comes on, and I had the spun yarn wrapped up in that tag. So the thing that happened with this one is I extended out the top, quite a ways, and then you do this diamond section, and I had to keep repeating the diamond area until you get the right count, because it's got these, these scallops. So you have to have the right stitch count so that it comes out, the scallops come out, so that you have enough for a full scallop. So I ended up having to extend the diamond area much farther than I was expecting I was going to. And so it came right down to about the last 4 rows. I ran out of yarn, and I could hardly believe it. This is the shawl design that I knit twice that one summer, several summers ago. I knit it in a gradient that was sort of green to kind of a turquoisey blue, and I knit it twice that summer because I knit it at the beginning, and then I wore it kind of right at the end of summer, and I lost the shawl at the mall, and then I knit it again to replace it. So this is that same pattern, and that yarn, that gradient yarn, was I think around 650 yards or 600 yards or something. So I thought I was doing it. I had extended that one also to use up most of the gradient, and I thought I was doing this one the same amount. Maybe I counted the yardage on this wrong. I don't know, but I was 4 rows short. And I was looking at all kinds of options that I have, double stranding, some kid silk haze with some merino that was this Wild Things color, but it was just merino, so it doesn't have this fuzzy look of the Wensleydale. And I had the just plain merino, and I had some other Wensleydale that was left over, that kind of bluish purple, and I had some green, and looking at all these options. So I went back in my fiber stash and was looking to see if I had some other kind of fiber that I could maybe make it work. and I found a whole bump of the Wensleydale that I didn't remember that I didn't spin. I bought 8 ounces of this color of this Wensleydale, and I'd only spun 4 of it. So I had a whole other 4 ounces. So I just ended up spinning that last bit, and then I could complete those last 4 rows. It was just, I didn't remember it was even back there in my stash. It made me very happy that I ended up being able to go on and finish this. So for show and tell, I don't have a whole bunch. Like I said, I didn't buy a sweater quantity, which was it was very disappointing to me. But I did buy a couple skeins of yarn. This one I just bought because it was a beautiful, beautiful yellow. It's not coming up the right yellow at all. It's looking much paler than it is. It's kind of a honey gold color, and this is from Brew City Yarns, and it is a merino nylon blend that is going to become socks. It's a 2-ply, kind of fairly thin yarn. So I have an idea of some socks that I want to do, and I thought yellow socks. Yellow is one of my favorite colors nowadays. So I saw it and I just thought, get it. So then I also bought some yarn from a vendor that I was unfamiliar with. I'd never kind of talked to her before. Her farm is called Croftland Farm. I know she's over in Sheboygan County, which is across the lake from me. But she raises Cormo and Coopworth sheep. And she had some beautiful, beautiful Cormo yarn. Her Cormo fleeces looked really pretty nice too. But she had kind of 2 different batches of yarns. Some of it was spun by a alpaca place, and that was a little fuzzier. And then she had this yarn, what I bought, and that was spun by Stonehenge over in Michigan. It's really nice. In fact, I've been considering sending kind of my fine fleeces that I have back in the cupboard over there and having them processed, maybe even into yarn, not even just into fiber. But I'll have to look up and see if it's worth kind of having some single fleeces processed down into a yarn, if it's cost effective. But anyway, this is the yarn I bought. I have 2 skeins of this. So I have about 500 yards. What I plan to make out of this is Bavarian twisted stitch mittens. I'm on a mitten kick. But I thought it's got a nice twist on it. And I think it will show up the little braids and things in BTS knitting. And I wasn't sure. It's 250 yards. It seems like that should be enough for a pair of mittens, but I didn't want to get partway through a mitten, the second mitten, and run out of yarn. So I bought 2, or I could, dye some. I did find my dyes after them being lost for about 10 years. I found them in the basement. Not that I will ever use them again because I do not enjoy dyeing, but they're there if I need them. And then I bought some fiber. I bought this big bump of Coopworth in this beautiful, beautiful blue. I could not decide on a color. And this comes from Hidden Valley Woolen Mill. They have Coopworth sheep, but they do this very light, airy prep. It's really nice to spin, and it's really nice to spin kind of woolen and make a singles. And so I had a hard time deciding on a color. Actually, she decided on a color. I just stood there and said, "You decide. I can't. It's that one, or that one." And she pulled out this one, and I was wearing a dress that was exactly this color. And I said, "Is that because I'm wearing this color?" So anyway, it'll be fun to spin. Many of my very favorite vendors have retired or aren't coming anymore. The thing that I was actually going for, that was at the very top of my list, was I wanted to buy some Shetland top or Shetland roving, I don't know what she specifically called it, from a woman who has been there for as long as I've been going. She always has these beautiful Shetland fleeces and beautifully prepared pin drafted rovings. And I wanted to get some of that roving to knit a sweater. I was going to spin for it. Was going to knit the sweater. That was top of my list. Her booth wasn't there. I came down the aisle, and the booths are generally always in the same spot. And there was someone else in her booth space. And right across the aisle was Jan Becker from Kim and Croft. And I went and talked to her. And I went, Julie's not there this year. And she said, oh, yeah, she retired last year. It was her last year. I didn't know that, or I probably would have bought some. So I was just, So I looked all over for Shetland. And there was one guy that had some bats prepared, but no, there was nothing to compare to what Julie Gillette used to bring. So anyway, my other vendor that I used to love buying fiber from was Sharon from Morning Sun Fiber Barn. She lived down in Iowa, and I think she retired too, because a friend of mine said she hadn't been at Shepherd's Harvest, and I don't think she was at Sheep and Wool last year either. But anyway, she was the one who used to bring these beautiful fine blends. I just knit the pie shawl into in July. That was fiber from hers. So soft and so nice. So anyway, I was looking for some place that had some kind of luxury blends, and there was, I don't even remember the name of the place, but I found this, which, yeah, it's really that shiny. It's got a lot of silk into it. It's 50-50, supposedly, yak and silk. But I started spinning this on my joy. I'm spinning a really fine single, and then I'm going to apply it with the silk thread. So that's what I mean. This will take a while, but it's very soft. It's not prepped as nicely as the stuff that Sharon used to do, but my very favorite thing that I bought at Sheep and Wool, I treated myself to a new Jenny the Potter mug. I think I've shown it on the podcast before. A mug from Jenny when she was first starting out. She wasn't even doing kind of the fiber shows. She had some mugs in an LIS up in Minneapolis that a friend of mine, her spinning group, used to meet at, and I was up there one time and went to her spinning group and bought one of the mugs. And then so that was the mug that I had. I bought one once at camp, and then I gave that away. But anyway, I've been thinking that I wanted a new one. I've looked at them the last couple of years, and I kept thinking the one that I really wanted was the one she did from Rhinebeck a few years back that had bluebirds on it and mittens, and I kept thinking, like hoping she was going to bring that. So anyway, I took a look at them this year, and I saw this one and thought it just spoke to me. So this is my new Jenny the Potter mug, and it's got flowers all over it. I just love it. It even has flowers on the bottom by her mark. There. So I've really been enjoying using it. It spoke to me, and all the little flowers. And so yeah, this kind of goes with my other big thing that I've started this fall is I started the Master Gardener program, which is kind of put on by the extension, the UW extension, and I've only had a couple of weeks of kind of classwork but it's been interesting so far. So that's a fun new thing. But I have been sewing quite a bit, but like I said at the beginning, I will probably do that in another episode. But I thank you all for sticking around and watching. I know that maybe these will be slightly longer than when I did kind of one a week, but I think for me it might work a little bit better in that I only have to sit down and record, at least maybe until we get into like winter. I don't know. We'll see how this works. Thank you all so much for watching, and until I see you next week. So thank you all for watching, and until I see you next time, happy knitting.